I'm Joanna Popper from HP, and we are very excited to be here today at AWE for a very timely panel on why VR collaboration and shared experiences in virtual environments work. At HP, we have the most comprehensive virtual reality commercial platform, and we work to enable virtual experiences that help you learn, create, collaborate, and connect. Today, we're here with leaders from various platforms who are going to talk to you about the work they're doing to enable these experiences. And at HP during this time, we've really been digging in to virtual collaboration and social experiences and using platforms in our meetings, our staff meetings, to create new product designs and to connect while we're all in this period of physical distancing, where we get to come together and play basketball or play dodgeball or just get to hang out and have that virtual water cooler moment. So today we are joined by Katie Kelly from Altspace and Microsoft, by Steve Grubbs from VictoryXR, and by Stephen Phillips from Theia Interactive. Thank you everyone for being here with us. So let's go ahead and introduce each of us and talk about our platforms and what the platforms create in the world of shared experiences and virtual collaboration. Let's start with Katie Kelly from Altspace and Microsoft.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're all staying healthy. My name's Katie. I'm the program owner for Altspace VR. Altspace has been around for about 5 years now, and I joined the team from Redwood City over through an acquisition to Microsoft. So we're now all happily in Redmond, and Altspace is a social VR platform, and we are a place for live events. It's a place where you can go to an LGBT meetup, a VR church, a tech talk. Anything you can think of, somebody has probably tried to do an event in Altspace. I've led the first yoga class. I hold that with pride. But especially now during COVID, more than ever, we're trying to enable connections and people meeting each other, going to conferences, going to a meetup, meeting and mingling, any way to really help people feel like they are together in a VR space.
Great. And now Steve Grubbs from VictoryXR.
I'm Steve Grubbs. I am the founder and CEO of VictoryXR. We are a company who has the mission of creating curriculum and creating learning opportunities in virtual reality and augmented reality. So we started with individual simulations, frog dissection, other animal dissections, and now we are moving into a collaborative learning space called VictoryXR Academy, and it's currently being built on the Engage platform.
And next, Stephen Phillips from Theia Interactive.
Yeah, I'm co-founder and CTO of Theia, and for the last 6 years now, 6 years today, we've been producing a variety of XR experiences for different enterprise companies, which includes a lot of collaborative VR experiences, whether it's training or design review. So we've begun to package up that expertise into tools to enable other developers to create their own collaborative experiences within Unreal Engine. And so next month, we are also launching one of our new platforms for the Optim plugin for Unreal Engine developers to get those multi-user, voice-enabled design review sessions up and running really quickly.
Great. So some anniversaries, we have launches, we have lots of exciting news on the panel today. So let's talk first about what have you found in your experiences, what works best in VR collaboration? Katie, let's start with you.
I mean, the nice kind of concise answer to that is that we don't know yet. I think that's one thing that Altspace focuses on, is that we're not going to know what people want to do in a virtual space unless you learn with users. So our first goal is to kind of create the technology to at least unblock people to experience being around other people. And the thing that we've learned the most is one of the best ways to create a really positive social environment on the web, because we are a stranger to stranger platform that can be a disaster in so many ways. But what we found is that if we create a positive culture enabled by the tech and give people tools to be able to kind of decide like how they want to spend their time, and then by creating the container of events, because what's the best way in the real world for people to interact? It's usually around common interests, going to a bar, being around people that want to talk about something that you care about. And so we've really tried to figure out, okay, how do we use that concept of the real world, bring that into a virtual space? Because we don't need to remake the wheel, especially with VR. You can learn from games and MMOs and all the wisdom that we've gotten from social communities that have existed on those platforms, and now you get to tie in the real world. So the biggest thing we've learned from what you can do with like presence and social is try to learn what you've learned before and then see where the technology enables new experiences and then double down on those. So for us, it's like, oh, in a large scale event, you can have a mute all button. I'm sure a lot of people in their actual event and playing for a large crowd and they're a band and everybody's like talking and chattering. If they could click mute all, great, wonderful. So we can do that in VR. How do people use that? So it's been really cool to see how VR enables things that combine the real world and what we've learned from the web.
That's great.
I'd say for the realm of 3D design review for like manufacturing or architecture, it leads to a lot of spontaneous discovery and like conversation within a 3D environment where you could talk over one another's shoulder, next to one another and see a 2D representation on a screen. But once you put on the VR headset, you can then have a whole new dimension to talk about and naturally experience something together, even though it doesn't exist yet. And it sparks a lot more conversation that way.
Yeah.
So the last 10 weeks, we've been running an anatomy class inside virtual reality, inside our little classroom. We had a science teacher, 20-year veteran of the classroom, Wendy Martin. And so she would teach this class. And in this class, we had students from Denver and North Carolina and Canada and Iowa. And she would reach her hand inside a human cadaver and pull out the stomach and hand it to the student from Denver. And the student from Denver would look at it as she taught. Then that student would hand it to the student next to her, which was a student from North Carolina. And that student would take the stomach and look at it and then expand it so large that she would step inside the stomach, look around and learn about it from inside. And this is the type of use case that makes sense in virtual reality. It's not something you can do on a webinar. It's not something you can do in the real world. And Wendy Martin does take her real world classes to a college to see an actual human cadaver, but she can take it a step further in virtual reality. So it gives us use cases for learning that far advance what can be done in these other ways.
For all of you, what are some surprising user insights since launching?
What it's been, because there's a couple of things there that I think are interesting. One is that what we've learned since launch. We've been around for a while, but more interesting is what we've learned from COVID. And I've never seen, we're in a really nice place. At least I feel grateful that we have an app that is bringing a lot of benefits right now during a really hard time. And I do an event every week in Altspace from 5 to 5:30 on Wednesdays just to talk to our users. Just even that, as somebody that runs a team, I get to make direct eye contact with our users and ask them how they're doing. Has been a huge benefit, but you also get to hear stories. And we've had people meet and get married in Altspace, actually in Altspace, and then meet in real life and then get married. And then people throw just giant parties and meet their closest friends. Like there's a lot of things that we've seen it utilize, but COVID now introduces this whole other issue, two of them where you just can't be around crowds anymore. So you go into Altspace, it's like, oh, I have not been around like 10, 20, 30 people in a space together, and you forget what that feels like. And I've heard from a lot of people that they would not have had that ability to connect with people if it wasn't for Altspace. But then all the people that are reaching out now that are relied on live events and just trying to think through what is our story for our conference, our prom, our whatever insert here that now has been canceled, or at least could be canceled for the foreseeable future. So the biggest insight that we've seen more recently is that we've been trying to solve a very specific need for people that already had a VR headset to answer that question for what social connection could be in a VR space. But now you actually have this much larger problem that I think we as like a smaller team now feel obligated and proud and excited to try to challenge what can Altspace do now in the midst of COVID. So I'm more curious about the insights we're going to get now. But what we've learned, I think, so far is things that you said. People stick around in a VR space longer. They're not distracted by notifications and things coming on their phone. They're actually in a VR environment. They're engaged. A lot of the events that we do, people are much more likely to stick around and stay, and even session times in VR are just longer in general. But I think I'm really more curious about what are the insights now that we'll see, now that people are relying on VR more.
Great.
After each class, our team would get together and figure out what mistakes we made, what we needed to do different. And there's a lot of technical issues with collaborative VR. So, for example, as I'm sure we all have learned, when people are in small groups and speaking to each other, you have to change the audio settings to spatial audio so that you don't have everybody's voice in your ear at the same time, so the further away. And for example, we gave every 2 to 3 students their own human cadaver to reassemble the organs. So the human organs are sitting outside the cadaver and you have to put them back inside, reassemble the human. But when they were too close together, it was just too loud and there was too much noise coming into your ear. So we had to separate those cadavers apart, so theoretically, if it were in the real world, they'd be about 10 to 15 feet apart. And through doing that, we were able to make the spatial audio work and allow us to initially start in a big group, but then split off into small learning groups. And it was a really productive way to learn.
Yeah, I have a similar discovery with audio in VR where you want to kind of recreate natural interactions and have people be speaking to one another at all ends of the room at all times, but it actually gets pretty overwhelming once you're in a headset with that many people hearing that many voices. So the spatialized audio is really important, as well as the optionality for muting everyone, like we just talked about, or muting yourself, including even just all the other options of device inputs if you're switching between a headset and a desktop computer. All these little things that are starting to add up that we're learning from traditional web conferencing technologies that actually do apply to VR more than I thought they did.
We've talked today about some great use cases where learning, creating, collaborating, and connecting really work well using VR platforms and social collaboration. What are some use cases where you found perhaps these tools and platforms aren't the best way to create these experiences?
Well, we always try to design things in a VR first sort of format, but it turns out that there are still quite a bit of people out there who either just don't like VR as a blanket, or they don't have access to the hardware, which is also a problem with the current situation, or they don't have the nice computer to run your nice content. So even though the experiences that we tend to focus on are really wonderful use cases for virtual reality, we always have to build in secondary ways to experience it, like a traditional 2-dimensional walkthrough or a 2D camera type of fly through, because people still are sensitive, or people still don't have the access that you think they might.
I agree with that. When it comes to there's a lot of things that you can solve in VR, and I think sometimes people in the VR industry feel like we're going to just solve all of them. But I like your question that there's some things we don't necessarily, if it ain't broke, why fix it? The best use I've seen of people using at least Altspace in combination with other media is people using Teams for presentations. We've done a couple conferences in tandem with Teams. So they would go and they would have more of that like one to many. Like right now, we don't need to have side conversations. I don't need to know about how your day was or your breakfast. So I'm sure I would love to know that about all of you. This format is more I'm presenting to you. And it's good because I can see your facial motions in a lot of VR scenarios. Like you just don't get that rich kind of sense of presence when it comes to facial movements. But what you miss though is that ability
it's
to
definitely something that many companies are working on, but yeah, not quite yet.
Absolutely. But when that's there, I think this actually solves that problem more. But now you add space to the equation. And so what are things that you don't get in space, especially with conference scenarios? We're finding that people are using our breakout session spaces just to have corners of the room where people are talking and networking. I heard from a company we're working with last week that there were 2 people that they introduced together in a mingle session that had always meant to meet, but they never had. They broke off for a little while. They were talking in the corner. We have spatial audio, so you can go closer to people that you want to hear. And the next day, one of them offered the other a job. You don't get that now in the midst of COVID where you don't have networking. So I'm curious to see how VR, just by introducing space, even with limited avatars and limited fidelity of the environments, you're still getting that sensation of actually being in front of somebody and sharing your story.
Great. So we learned that VR brings job offers. So That's a good
Yeah,
enough reason to get into your VR headset, right? That's what we just learned. Okay, we're going to turn to Q&A. So get your questions in. Before we get to Q&A, I'm going to mention a couple of really exciting events that we have coming up tomorrow. Tomorrow morning at AWE, HP and Microsoft have a keynote presentation at 9:20 Pacific. We're going to have some really exciting announcements for you, so make sure to tune in. And then in the afternoon at 4 p.m. Pacific, HP and Microsoft will have a live event in Altspace where we're going to have a fireside chat and some tech talks and unveil some really exciting news. So make sure you come back tomorrow and stay with us. So now we're turned to Q&A.
Hi, what a great panel. Hi, Joanna.
Hi, Amy. Great
so
to
nice
see
to
you.
see everyone.
Great to
I
be
know.
here with everybody at AWE Virtual.
It's amazing. And that was really exciting. And I loved the conversation. We do have a couple of questions. One is, how would you allow asynchronous collaboration with VR collaborations? Could you have an AI agent copying what a user was doing earlier and replicating those actions later for another group of users? But I guess mainly it's sort of asynchronous collaboration.
Yeah, I'll let Steve Grubbs start with that one. I think some of the work that you're doing, Steve, right now already does incorporate some asynchronous timelines.
Yeah, we approach that two ways. One is, first of all, we create these human holograms that are pre-recorded, but you can interact with them and cause certain actions and sort of choose what they do next. So that's one way. Inside our social VR, our campus, though, what will happen is that you'll have a live session. Let's say you have an astronaut teaching students on Mars, and then that will be recorded. So students after that can all go in, walk around, and interact with that. But then after they have been a part of that experience, they can go and go back in and participate in some of the activities that are interactive. So even though watching the astronaut speak on Mars won't be interactive after it's recorded, some of the activities like manipulating the Mars rover would be.
That's great. And so we have another question around what use cases in industries who are maybe not using VR today, but you see, whether spurred on by COVID and our situation now, or just in general, that VR might be moving into, especially now that we have some of these robust collaboration tools.
Yeah, we've seen that this isn't an industry specific, that any business that's looking to create, to learn, to connect, collaborate, can make use of the various VR tools and collaboration tools. And so whether it's AEC that Theia works a lot with, or higher ed that Stephen works with, or all the different both business and enterprise as well as personal use cases that Altspace works with, we're working with companies that are using VR from training, but from healthcare to welding, to fire safety. So there's really practically no industry that wouldn't see a use case, as long as the industry has the need to either drive revenue, decrease costs, increase productivity, increase efficiency, or create innovation at their business, and to connect people. So that basically describes most businesses.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think everyone, especially now, has the need for collaboration. And I think it sparked a lot of interest in VR in general. Thank you guys so much. What an amazing panel. I wish we had more time with you, but we're going to definitely come back and hear more from you, Joanna, tomorrow with all of your announcements with Microsoft. So thanks so much, everyone.
Excellent. Yeah,
Thank you.
I will be back tomorrow with Microsoft for a keynote at 9:20, and then we have an event in Altspace tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. So join us there, and those times are Pacific. So check the time in your local area. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Katie, Stephen, and Amy for being on with us. We really appreciate it.